Chodesh Tov, a guten Erev Shabbos. Yet again, we find ourselves asking those great questions about society. We ask, what's the best method of self-government, self-regulation? Is democracy really such a good idea? Can we be trusted to put leaders in place who have the best interests of the people at all times? What happens when a self-righteous demagogue makes a bid for power? How can the rhetoric of political leadership stop itself from becoming scorched earth, all or nothing, life or death, all the time? Never mind the headlines and the blog posts and the editorials. This is all in the Parsha of the week. Actually, this week and last week, Shalach and this week, Parsha Korach, these two Parshas are never read together, as sometimes Torah portions are. Maybe it's too much to absorb in 1 week. We need 2 full weeks at least to reflect on these sedras and absorb their lessons. Last week we read about a kind of failed experiment in democracy. Moshe sent 12 emissaries into the land of Canaan to check it out in advance of our coming in, entering, conquering, settling the land. It was as democratic as we could possibly hope for. 1 representative went from each tribe, and each was a person of standing, a leader of the tribe, you would think. You would think that the best minds would get together, get on the same page, and act with the people's best interests at heart. Instead, the experiment failed. The day itself was immortalized as Tisha B'Av, a day of crying, and the entry into the land was delayed for a full generation. Or maybe it was a flash of insight on the part of the spies. They said, no, we won't be able to do it. Not that they doubted their military capability, much less the fact that God was ordaining and directing this mission. Maybe they looked at their own capabilities, abilities, and said, boy, we are a motley crew to try to govern. What are we going to do? Have a series of corrupt rulers and kings? Fight amongst ourselves? Allow the priesthood and other hallowed institutions to become commoditized, bought and sold? Are we going to wind up destroying each other verbally in Knesset debates? Maybe the spies had a flash of insight here and had at least a moment's pause about the efficacy of group rule. Then we have this week's exploration of leadership in another paradigm, rule by a strong personality. What could go wrong there, right? Let's say, for example, the strong personality in the leadership position is Moshe Rabbeinu. First of all, for the duration of the entire Moshe narrative, up to this point, there's been a little subplot happening in the background involving Dasan and Aviram. They're like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, sort of, in the biblical story. They pop up here and there in the background at opportune moments, try to undercut, subvert Moshe's leadership. They're there during Egyptian slavery. They're the Jewish intermediaries then between the slaves and the taskmasters, prison functionaries, sort of. Their role in either diverting or intensifying the Mitzri zeal in persecuting Jews is a matter of debate in the Midrash. Rashi names them as the 2 Jews that Moshe saw fighting and tried to intervene. This was also Dasan and Aviram. They slandered Moshe to Pharaoh. They were the last stragglers to leave Egypt. The Be'er Mayim Chaim advances a theory that the sea split for a second time, just to permit these 2 to cross and join the rest of the Jewish people. They tried to subvert Moshe's authority another time by spreading out manna Shabbos morning to disprove what Moshe had said, that you had to gather a double portion on Friday because there wasn't going to be any manna on Shabbat morning. Before there was fake news, there was this fake manna incident. And finally, they antagonized Moshe in our current Parsha with the Korach incident. It's like having a 2-man dirty trick shop. They seem never to get tired of trying to make Moshe look bad. If you think that negative press is a function of current society, current media, here's all the proof you need that it's always gone on. So Dasan and Aviram proved not to be much more than a nuisance with all their digs at the leader, but at some point, clearly enough, doubt was sown in the minds of Bnei Yisrael that they were ready, or some felt ready, for an alternative version of centralized leadership. Enter Korach. Korach was a cousin of Moshe and Aaron, so it begs the question from an outsider's point of view, was there a significant difference in the leadership that Korach now proposed. Clearly, Korach was a populist. He harangued Moshe with questions based on the very Torah that Moshe had been teaching. Mamleches Kohanim v'goy kadosh. The Jewish people are a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Each Jew is a prince or a princess. So, why should Moshe be the leader? Why should Aaron be the Kohen? Why indeed? Korach didn't propose any different paradigm. Behind this popular and egalitarian approach lurked his own self-interest. No great surprise. He wanted to be the Moshe. It was a pretty transparent maneuver, but it managed to attract a number of followers, 250 followers, to join this rebellion. It did not end well, as you know. The earth opened up and swallowed them all. This is even a more dramatic denouement than a simple old vote recount or a parliamentary vote of no confidence. I'm sure each of us could come up with the name of at least one politician that we would have liked the earth to open up and swallow whole. When we get back to having a regular Kiddush, we'll discuss this. We'll put names in nomination. But Korach wanted to flatten the hierarchy of the Jewish people. His chief complaint was that Moshe had put too steep an angle on the org chart, on the pyramid of organization. There was the rank and file, the Bnei Yisrael, there were the Leviim, the servants of the priests, basically, and the Kohanim, the priests themselves, the elite. Korach argued, why not make everyone equal? Why not raise yourself up? Why do you raise yourself up? He challenged Moshe and Aaron. He said, let's all be in this together. The argument's not without merit, yet it's undercut by Korach's desire that he would be the leader in place of Moshe. Now, had he let things be as they were, he would have been guaranteed a place of prestige as a kinsman, tribesman of Moshe and Aaron. But it wasn't enough for him. He wanted to be at the helm. We all read Animal Farm growing up, George Orwell's parable of the animals that take over the farm in the name of animal equality. But it's not a very long book, so it doesn't take long before we come to understand that some animals are more equal than others. You have to look long and hard to find a movement in human history that wasn't ultimately corrupted in this way. The origin of the movement is always for the people, always for the people. Better wages, better living conditions, more equality, and the feelings of fraternity that follow that naturally. Yet almost without fail, and I'm having trouble coming up with a counterexample, an elite emerges and abuses their self-appointed power, and sooner or later, the whole house of cards comes tumbling down. George Orwell wrote as a disappointed socialist. He published his novella in the summer of 1945 as one war was coming to an end and another one was heating up. He didn't have to be a prophet to foretell the Soviet Union's collapse. 45 years later, he saw the writing on the wall. The self-interest, the corruption, abuse of power, subjugation of those in whose name the revolution was fought. I don't know how familiar Orwell was with Korach or biblical models of subversion, but he certainly identified this all-too-human tendency for overreaching. Now, it's very popular to complain about political leadership in our day and age. I'll confess, we're still a ways away from Yom Kippur, but I can confess, I enjoy a good complaint now and again about the political ruling class, just like the next person. We vilify our leaders, hold them responsible for their failure to fix these long-standing problems, gaps in the system that we live with. We become disenchanted with their leadership, so we make a change. In America, it only took 4 years. In Israel, it took 12 or 25, depending on how you're counting. Now that the change is underway, we hope for better things. Why do we hope for better things? Certainly not because experience has been any great indicator. By and large, the names at the top of the marquee change, and all too rarely do the real problems actually get addressed. So the commonality between the stories of the spies last week and Korach this week, between what Orwell and others noted in the doomed nature of populist leadership and our days of slash and burn political discourse, one takeaway is not to focus so much on the leaders. It's time to take a look at the followers. In other words, let's look at ourselves. If we are waiting for our political leaders to set the example, to illuminate the path before us, to chart the golden mean, maybe we're setting the bar too low. Maybe change happens not when the politicians change, but rather when the people, when we change our attitudes. It's a rare leader, maybe too rare to be statistically significant. A rare leader who can really inspire a new way of thinking among a critical mass of people to make the ground fertile for real change. Maybe the lesson of Parshas Korach is that change has to come from the ground up, not from the top down. Maybe that's the lesson of the entire book of Bamidbar, in the wilderness, which is exactly where we are. This Thursday and Friday we began the month of Tammuz. It's the 4th month of the Hebrew calendar. The first month, biblically speaking, is Nisan, the month of spring, renewal, miracles, redemption. God takes us out of Egypt, whether we're ready or not, with a strong hand and an outstretched arm, leading us even when and where we don't realize we need to be led. The second month of the calendar is Iyar, a month entirely devoted to preparation. Each day we're counting up to Sinai. Sivan is the 3rd month when God assembles us around Mount Sinai and gives us the Torah again from above to below. This is Shavuot, another example of our national destiny. And then comes Tammuz, and we find ourselves in the wilderness. There's still a pillar of fire to lead our way by night, and a pillar of cloud by day. At least there was in Moshe's generation. But in our wilderness, the cloud and the fire are not as clear, not so readily visible. And the Moshe Rabbeinu is concealed. The only thing we do have is plenty of Korachs. There seemed to be a Korach on every street corner, every web page, popping up and blocking our view of whatever we went on the net to find in the first place. Korachs with their promises of a better tomorrow. Korachs with a new vision of leadership, which is really the old one. It's just they'll be in charge this time. The 4th month is where we have to find our own way through the wilderness to the promised land. So what to do? How to maintain our true compass on this journey? We keep centered. We keep focused. We keep all our GPSs, our godly positioning systems, calibrated and directing us where we need to go. We stay together. We keep moving forward. We keep our eyes on the ultimate prize, and with God's help, we'll get there. We will get there. Good Shabbos.